Number 10. VANISHER. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually, he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat VANISHER by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. VANISHER is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9. Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O'Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about the unexpected yet powerful villains that we don't usually get to talk about, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his Murder World. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap Mastermind walked the Hellions, and prior to that Mr. Sinister, into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole like 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. Like, if he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for like some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently. Number 7. The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also just thinking back and like the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's like a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass, which which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6. Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an External comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kandra from is her role as benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins Guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kandra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approach that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, you know me, I'm Kandra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful. Number 5. Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as like a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information, and it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet, sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kind of like a glimpse into his like tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should in case she ever decides to, you know, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone. Because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3. Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. Number 2. Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of Destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return Destiny but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1. Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of the comic's first arc. The Madeline Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madeline, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so. Number 10. Deadpool. Deadpool has gone through phases where he was fully cured of his power set and even pretty once more in the comics, like back during Daniel Way's Deadpool run, looking completely normal but without his healing factor. But the most startling shift when it comes to Deadpool's appearance has to be between his on-screen adaptations. That's right, we're talking about the comparison between Deadpool's cinematic debut in the X-Men Origins Wolverine film and his own self-titled film franchise. Although oddly enough, both roles feature him played by Ryan Reynolds. The two adaptations could not be more different. Thankfully in Deadpool 2, Wade manages to fix Cable's temporal dial. Using this device to time travel, Wade is not only able to save Vanessa, who initially died at the beginning of that film, but is also able to clean up the timelines by killing the previous version of himself, who is also known as Weapon 11. It should also be noted that in X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool appeared fully as a villain, as opposed to the lovable mess of an anti-hero we've come to know him as within his own film franchise. Number 9. Raquel. I never know how to say this name, but I'm pretty sure it's like Raquel. How do you say Skrull names? That's the question. For some reason, probably because she had been gone so long, Raquel, aka the Skrull Empress, aka Emperor Doric VIII / Hulkling / Teddy Altman's grandmother, was completely unrecognized when she returned. Raquel was revealed to be alive and well, and also sleuthing it up as she impersonated Tanault the Pursuer, an elite member of the Kree forces. And apparently Raquel had been impersonating Tanault so long she had in essence created her persona and basically was her. Raquel had actually been plotting and planning in secret, putting in place all the pieces to bring together the Kree and Skrull Empire, uniting them in an alliance in order to ensure her grandson was the one to rule over the now allied empire, as we saw in Empire. That's the name of the event, so not to be redundant. It was an empire, but it's spelled Empire with a Y because it's a whole other thing. And yet when she was revealed in that event to be the one revealed as the Skrull pretending to be Tanault, many Marvel fans actually needed to crack open their comic history books and review just who exactly she was, with many people mistaking her for Veronki, the Skrull Queen. But yes, this is Raquel. She was believed to have died when the Skrull homeworld perished along with her daughter Princess Nell, as their world was devoured by Galactus. She made her first appearance appearance in the Fantastic Four original series in issue 206 and was believed to have perished in issue 257. But she didn't, she was still alive, and then she came back years later and everyone went, who is that? What? Veronki? What? Not Veronki. Two different people. Number 8. KRAVEN the Hunter. You might think you recognize KRAVEN, but do you really? After all, the current KRAVEN that you've seen turning up in the current Beyond storyline of the Amazing Spider-Man series is actually none other than KRAVEN's last son. Well, his last clone son, anyway. This clone of KRAVEN was given the name of Last Son after he hunted down all his other brothers, his other clone brothers, who had also been trained by Sergei Kravinoff, the KRAVEN himself. As such, this clone of KRAVEN was named his true heir, and since then has also taken up the mantle of KRAVEN the Hunter. So while he may look like KRAVEN, albeit a younger version of him, this KRAVEN the Hunter is not actually the original. So I guess this is a character that you would recognize, but in so doing you'd be wrong, which means I guess you didn't really recognize him then, did you? This version of KRAVEN made his first appearance in the current run of The Amazing Spider-Man, which started in 2018, first appearing back in issue 16 as the Last Son. Number 7. Xemnu. Xemnu made his first appearance in Journey into Mystery in issue number 62. We learned that Xemnu was actually a prisoner and a criminal who was retrieved and accidentally revived by a human and electrician named Joe Harper. Xemnu would go on to become known as Xemnu the Living Hulk, and would also prove to be a powerful cosmic, psionic, and all-around bizarre enemy to the Hulk and the Hulk family in time. Initially, he clashed with the original superhero powerhouse team known as the Defenders. Xemnu in his first appearance has brownish or reddish fur, but currently has reappeared in the comics with white fur, making him look kind of like a space yeti. You may not recognize him because you forgot him, or because he's just so weird, or it could be just because of this change when it comes to, you know, his overall fur color. But yeah, he's got different, I guess he dyed his fur? I don't know. What happened there? Number 6. Norman Osborn. Well, you might currently recognize Norman Osborn in terms of his appearance. When it comes to his actions and his alignment, you might not. And in modern comics, Norman has also gone through a couple dramatic redesigns and makeovers in recent history. At one point, Norman gets plastic surgery to completely change his facial appearance, reinventing himself as Mason Banks and becoming the head of Alchemax. There's even an unmasked point where we were all kind of like, wait, who's that? And then he's like, I changed my face, but it's me, Norman Osborn, aka also Mason Banks. He also has been the head of Hammer and his own Dark Avengers, and for a time posed as their version of Iron Man, tarnishing the mantle of Iron Patriot, and more recently, a depowered Norman bonded with the Carnage symbiote, allowing himself to use the Goblin Serum once more, but ultimately being driven insane by that whole experience and believing himself to actually be prime Carnage host and serial killer Cletus Cassidy. Now sane again, however, and seemingly purified by the Sin Eater, currently in the comics, Norman is on a path of redemption, having gained a new lease on life and being cured of his usual villainous intentions. Or so it would seem. I never trust Norman, but that's what's up currently. Number 5. Galactus. One villain who recently got a very mummy-inspired looking makeover was Galactus during his time in Thor's latest series as written by Donny Cates. Here in the first arc of the 2020 Thor series, referred to as Volume 6 overall of Thor, Thor takes on the immensely powerful cosmic entity known as the Black Winter. Because the Black Winter is so powerful, Thor is forced to team up with Galactus to defeat it. Unfortunately, he also learns that Galactus is actually kind of a herald for the Black Winter. FYI, that is just how powerful of a force the Black Winter is. He has Galactus as a herald. After devouring 5 planets to bolster his own power, Galactus has this power stripped from him by Thor upon this revelation. Thor leaves Galactus drained of the power cosmic, wrinkled, and de-armored, even taking Galactus's helmet as a trophy, using it as the entrance to his throne room. So while you might have recognized him previously, Galactus then got super upgraded and now is very mummified and also very dead. Oof. Number 4. Onslaught. Onslaught initially was a villain with a mysterious background. Despite the fact the powerful villain looked a ton like Magneto and seemed to pack a psionic powerhouse of abilities that echoed an evil Professor X, the character's true identity as really both of those mutants wouldn't be confirmed till after his initial appearance. When Onslaught appeared again, it was in a similar vein, and while the symbol of Onslaught might be similar, this time around when it came to the character's identity, they were even less recognizable, as it was explained that Basically all the mutants of Krakoa were, in a way, Onslaught, and that Onslaught was able to exist through their constant resurrections. So while you might recognize the look of Onslaught when they returned, their true identity was even more of a mystery than the first time around. And their final form that we saw during X-Men The Onslaught Revelation was pretty wild as well, getting a bit of an update to match even the current character designs of what an amalgamated Charles and Eric would look like currently. I like that that version of Onslaught has like the black suit now, the tight black suit that Charles wears. It's a look. Number 3, One Below All. I think one of the biggest revelations of modern comics was learning that even a being as good as the One Above All, who is basically considered to be like Marvel God, has a dark side. The One Below All ended up being a major villain in the Immortal Hulk series, and we later learned that their power actually came from one of the most divine and good beings in the Marvel universe, the One Above All. The One Below All is like the Hulk for the One Above All. In other words, their darker and much more destructive other half. So while you might know the One Above All and you might know the One Below All, I bet you'd be surprised to learn that they were actually directly connected to one another. They can't exist without the other, especially given how different in appearance and alignment they both are. But this revelation was also super powerful and fitting for a series that was really all about forgiving and reconciling the darker side of the Hulk, the Hulks, and ultimately of humanity and our own individual selves. After all, we all have like a little bit of a Hulk side to us. Number 2, Killmonger. If you go on far enough back, Eric Killmonger easily becomes one of Marvel's villains you would not soon recognize. And that goes both ways, whether we're talking about more recent fans looking back in comic history to his first appearance in Jungle Action, volume number 2, or whether we're talking about his initial fans looking at his modern MCU adaptation and comic redesign, which obviously takes inspiration from the MCU version of Eric. Killmonger made his first appearance in the second volume of Jungle Action from the 1970s in issue number 6, and even from that front cover, he just looks like really different. Here, Eric does not sport any self-created bodily scars marking his kills, but instead comes with a lot of spiky accessories, including what appears to be a spike belt, which he uses as a weapon to fight against his foe and his rival, Black Panther. All the spikes. Now he's got scars, but back then he had spikes. Number 1, the Leader. I doubt after all this time if the Leader even really recognizes himself, considering what he looks like now. Following the events of Immortal Hulk, the Leader is left no longer a supervillain, but just a guy. Throughout the course of the series, we saw the Leader only grow more evil and more powerful, it seemed. He was eventually basically influenced or possessed by the One Below All, the most powerful of all Hulk-related baddies, and possibly the baddest of the bad just in general. However, after the two beings were separated from one another, Stearns was left as just a man, returned to normal. The Hulk decided to forgive the Leader, and he returned back to the Earth with all the other Hulks and Bruce Banner. It's been a long time, but Sam Stearns is no longer the Leader, at least not currently in the comics. I mean, he could return to being the Leader at some point. Instead, Samuel Stearns is just Samuel Stearns.
And it's at Yotat. Yotat overheard two Brood half-breeds telling his boss that they allegedly killed the Collector and had stolen his weapons collection. Yotat used this information to uncover the weapons cache, and then attempted to trade them to another mob boss in exchange for a membership in his organization. But this mob boss named Diogo had other ideas. He betrayed Yotat, shooting him and then leaving for dead, and then blowing up the weapons depot with Yotat inside. However, somehow he survived the explosion and was actually transformed by it. And when the world was transformed into Battle World for the Secret Wars storyline, Yotat caught up with Diogo at the Sobolski bar on Nowhere. After killing the man who betrayed him, Yotat was confronted by Rocket Raccoon. Rocket attempted to execute him for what he viewed as a murder, only to see that his blast had no effect. Drax the Destroyer then rescued Rocket Raccoon by knocking Yotat unconscious, and then the Nova Corps arrived to take him into custody. However, later on he did defeat the Guardians after a few months, but this guy looks awesome too. Just look at it. It looks badass. And at 9, the Collector. Taneleer Tavan is one of the oldest living beings in the universe. His species at Cygnus X1 was one of the first to evolve after the Big Bang. Death took Tavan as the last surviving representative of his species and then gave him total immortality. Tavan, as well as one of the representatives of each of the first species in the universe, cannot die. These people have associated among themselves to create the Elders of the Universe. However, after his wife Matani died, he learned that one of the factors of his immortality was the will to live, and Matani had lost lost hers. Tavon then decided that he would not suffer the same fate and looked for a goal to dedicate his life to. He then had a vision seeing powerful things that would rise, determined to destroy the universe, and he decided to prevent this from happening and that he would dedicate his life to collecting artifacts and living beings throughout the universe and place them out of danger. Then after the destruction of the universe, he could repopulate it and bequeath the knowledge of cultures from the past. So he became the Collector to continue being immortal, which is certainly an interesting origin story. And at 8, Ronan the Accuser. In the MCU, Ronan was a radical Kree warlord and former member of the Accusers. In 1995, during the Kree-Skrull War, Ronan worked with Yon-Rogg and the Star Force after the ambush in Torfa to wipe out the last of the Skrull refugees. Ronan and the Accusers were then called to drop warheads on Earth to wipe out the remaining Skrull opposition there, but was forced to retreat when Captain Marvel launched a counteroffensive against the Kree, promising retribution. You will get retribution. Further disgusted by the peace treaty made between the Kree Empire and Xandar, Ronan initiated a new campaign to eradicate the Xandarnians by forging an alliance with Thanos, offering the orb in exchange for the destruction of Xandar. After a long search, Ronan did acquire the orb, but after having seen its true destructive capabilities, betrayed Thanos and chose to take the orb's power for himself. Using this newfound power, he attacked Xandar, only to be defeated and killed by the Guardians of the Galaxy in an iconic dance battle. But honestly, with the power of an Infinity Stone, it's a wonder how he actually managed to lose. But that single stone still made him pretty damn powerful. And at 7, Jason. Jason was the only son of the previous Emperor of Spartax, and therefore their sole heir to the throne. He was summoned by his father when the war broke out between the Spartax and the Badoon, and on his way back home he was forced to crash land on Earth, where he fell in love with a human woman named Meredith Quill. The two began a short relationship before Jason was forced to leave to wage war for the Spartax. Meredith would later go on to give birth to his son, Peter Quill. Yeah, that's right, MCU fans. In the comics, Peter's dad is actually Emperor of Spartax and not Ego the Living Planet, which honestly makes more sense given that, you know, Ego is a whole planet. But years later, Jason joined the other members of the Galactic Council to declare Earth off limits to extraterrestrial interaction. Once his son defended Earth from a Badoon attack though, Jason sent Spartax soldiers to capture him and his team of Guardians of the Galaxy. However, the Guardians managed to escape and flee. And at 6, Thane. Thane is the secret Inhuman son of Thanos. After a descendant Inhuman tribe ran afoul of Thanos and his army, one Inhuman woman returned home pregnant with Thanos' child. I don't even want to know how that worked. The son of Thanos was convinced by Jason that the X-Men and the Guardians had committed such a massacre in an attempt to remove him from the conflict, thus giving Thane a reason to join his side. After reacquiring the Black Vortex, Thane submitted to it. This increased his power by 10-fold. Basically, the Black Vortex is like a mirror-like object that when you see your reflection, it shows you the ideal version of yourself and then turns you into that ideal version. So yeah, this dude's powers increased a lot, turning him into an incredibly powerful villain. As part of his deal with Mr. Knife, Thane then used his cosmically enhanced power to encase the entirety of Spartax in his amber construct. The trapped Spartax would later be traded to the Brood by Mr. Knife in exchange for it taking advantage of their expansion. A freaking cosmically enhanced son of Thanos? Yeah, that's pretty freaking powerful. That's nuts. Halfway through into number 5, Thanos. While usually portrayed as an evil bent villain, many stories have alternately depicted Thanos as having a twisted moral compass and thinking that his actions are actually justified. The character's perhaps best known role came in the 1991 storyline of the Infinity Gauntlet, the culmination of several previous story arcs, which saw him successfully assembling the 6 Infinity Gems into a single gauntlet and then using them to wipe out half the universe's population, including many of its heroes, in an effort to earn the affection of Mistress Death, the living embodiment of death in the Marvel Universe. Yeah, this dude wanted to get it on with death. Although these events were later undone, the storyline has remained one of the most popular published by Marvel, which was also later adapted into the MCU with the Infinity War and Endgame movies, which are the 2 highest grossing Marvel movies of all time, and the 2 highest grossing superhero movies of all time, which only serves to show the absolute power that the Mad Titan has over the Marvel Universe. Plus, he also managed to collect all the Infinity Gems and then wipe out half the universe just to get Lady Death on his dick. So I mean, he's pretty crazy. Or dare I say, mad. In at 4, Ego. In the MCU, Ego was a celestial, a primordial and powerful being, and the biological father of Peter Quill. A living planet with a humanoid extension of himself, Ego sought to find meaning in his life and, to achieve this end, planned to remake the entire universe via an omnidimensional extinction level event known as the Expansion, using seeds planted on various worlds to terraform them into new extensions of himself, thereby eradicating all other life in the universe but himself. You get it? This process required 2 Celestials, however, so Ego traveled across the universe, siring children on humanoid and alien planets everywhere in an attempt to produce a celestial heir, eventually having thousands of children. Have you seen the show Seed? Yeah, it's like that. Ego hired the Yondu Ravager clan to abduct and transport some of these offspring to his planet, though none of them showed signs of having inherited celestial DNA, so Ego killed them. However, when he learned of a man from Earth who held an Infinity Stone without dying, he knew this must be the celestial son he had with Meredith Quill. But I think the most impressive part about this character is that not only is he a celestial, but he is also the commander from Sky High, meaning that technically Peter Quill is Will's stronghold, and honestly, that's a theory I can get behind. Sky High is a good movie, you should watch it. If you haven't seen it, watch Sky High. Penultimately, in number 3, Zeus. Zeus is a member of the Olympians, a group of humanoid beings that hail from the pocket dimension of Olympus. He was worshipped by the humans of ancient Greece and the Roman Empire. He is supreme monarch of the Olympians, god of the heavens, sky, and weather. Kinda like the 3 Doris Pokemon from Gen 5, from Black and White, Thunderous, Landorus, and Tornadus? Yeah. Zeus was the youngest son of the Titan Kronos, who ruled Olympus and Rhea. The Titans were the offspring of the sky god Uranus and the primal earth goddess of Gaia. Kronos overthrew his father's rule by fatally wounding him, and then the dying Uranus prophesies that Kronos would be overthrown by his own children, which I guess is kinda poetic. As a result of this though, upon the birth of each of his own children, Kronos had them imprisoned in Tartarus, the most despicable section of the extra dimension known as Hades. Yeah, hell. However, appalled by the mistreatment of their children, Kronos' wife Rhea concealed their 6th pregnancy from him and secretly gave birth to Zeus, and then gave the infant Zeus to Gaia for safekeeping. I don't know why I need to explain how a literal god of Olympus is a powerful villain. Like, do I really need to do that? I don't think so. I should have just said Zeus and then moved on. But ultimately, in number 2, Galactus. Galactus is the sole survivor of the 6th incarnation of the multiverse. Originally, Galactus was a humanoid named Galen, born in the previous incarnation of Earth 616 on planet Ta, a paradise-like world whose civilization is said to have the most advanced of any of the known universe at the time. However, the 6th Infinity and all its universes were in their final stages of collapse due to the multiversal renewal cycle, being consumed by the abstract entity known as the Black Winter. When the cosmos was going to meet its natural end, Galen was then approached by the embodiment of the 6th Infinity, the sentience of the multiverse basically, who merged its essence with the mortal Galen, this way giving birth to a new entity that would survive the multiversal renewal, Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds. However, the Black Winter also presented an alternate account of these events, saying that Galen's survival was it sparing him, and then turned him into Galactus to mark him as its herald. Galactus possesses the immeasurable power cosmic, and is one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, having near limitless godlike powers, and being considered an omnipotent entity. He's mega OP if he's eaten enough worlds. That's kinda like me. I relate. And finally, in at number 1, Michael KORVAC. Being first introduced in Giant Size Defenders number 3 in 1975, Michael KORVAC's father was killed due to events surrounding his birth in 2977. He was raised by his mother, but when the solar system he lived on Earth 691 and its colonies became the target for the Brotherhood of Badoon, Michael became a traitor and helped the Brotherhood. However, after a few moments of hesitation, he was cut in half and fused with his computer by the Brotherhood, turning him into a cyborg of sorts. But this seemed to do more harm than good, at least for the Brotherhood, since now KORVAC was dead set on killing those who did this to him. So, way to go. At least until the Grandmaster transported him to battle Doctor Strange and the Defenders. KORVAC intentionally lost this battle and instead siphoned some of the Grandmaster's power using his new cybernetic abilities, making him even more powerful than before. Eventually, this guy ends up impersonating Kang the Conqueror and the Watcher, and with his ability to siphon power from others, this makes him one of the scariest villains in the Marvel Universe. At least if he was smart about it and didn't get himself killed. He ends up wiping himself out of existence, after killing basically all the Avengers and the Guardians though. It's freaking nuts, okay?